Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignot, CEO of the experience agency, D-Flash. Each week on the show, I bring on someone who's doing some game-changing work, and this week's episode is no different. Super excited to have Clair Carter-Ginn, who's a partner at the Forecast agency, who has a really incredible journey and story, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So take a listen. Hey, Claire.
Hello, Laura. How are you?
Good. It's fall.
Oh,
I'm wearing a
not
sweater.
ready. I'm not ready. My heat went on. I can smell it. I can hear it. It's
Mine
waking
went
me up
on
in the
with-
middle of the night.
Mine went on without me doing anything. And I'm like, how did it go on without me knowing anything? Like, is it possessed by a demon? I'm not entirely certain. It's a little weird.
Well, if it is, that seems to be a theme in TV right now. Is the the sort of the possessed or whatnot. I saw Evil is a new show, and I'm like, what's that about? Oh, possession. Of course. What else would it be about? Yeah.
Because, of course, at this point, it's not your excuse for anything. So possession works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally
Heating included.
Totally. Without question. So as you know, you listen to the show. I have the same question. First things off. So, Claire, what was your first job?
Well, my journey into retail started young and early. My first job was in the receiving area at Target store number 3 in Crystal, Minnesota.
Wait, you're from Minnesota?
I've been a little bit of everywhere, but my mom actually moved out to Minnesota after she was in grad school. So when I was 7 years old, we picked up and moved to Minneapolis so she could work for Target stores.
Wow.
Yes. And not quite related, obviously, but whatever. 9 years later, I ended up putting all the pricing tags onto the clothing items in the back of the Target store. So I knew how much every single top in the men's, women's, and children's department was. Yes.
And so your love of retail started there.
It did. Strangely enough, I ended up moving around quite a lot, but ended up back at Target Corporation. Target actually started out in the basement of a department store in downtown Minneapolis that was called Dayton's. And Dayton's was it was the epitome of style as far as I was concerned at 8, 9 years old, because you would go, that's where you went to the Santa breakfast at Christmas. They always had the beautiful windows. Not being from New York, I'd grown up up until the point we moved to Minneapolis, I was in Boston and North Carolina. And so when we came to Minneapolis, this was the chicest store I'd ever seen. This was Barney's as far as I was concerned. Of course, I didn't know what Barney's was at the time. But it was the most amazing experience. And so eventually when I went back to Minneapolis, I worked for Dayton Hudson Corporation, which then became Target Corporation, and they bought Marshall Fields, which was just about if I thought Dayton's was good, it had nothing on Marshall Fields on State Street. Yeah. And so ended up going back to Minneapolis for a while to work with them in a completely different capacity. So I've sort of Target's been paying my bills on and off for quite some time. And I still
and your childhood.
Yeah, exactly.
At this point, you should own lots of stock.
I wish I did, but my mom retired from there not long ago, and she has a lifetime 10% discount, and that is a wondrous thing. I will tell you, I will take that any day of the week.
This is true, because how would it happen when you walk into Target? You spend $50. Without question. Like, you just walk in, I want toilet paper. How are there $50 of stuff in my cart already? Okay.
I know. That's the one thing about living in New York, is I have to remember that I have to take all this home on the subway.
Exactly.
So it changes the dynamic a little bit of buying the bulk, 32-pack of extra strong Charmin every time I go.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
Cannot do that.
There's no storage.
There's nowhere to put this.
Yeah.
So, Claire, what is it you actually do now? Because I think your job is fascinating, and I think people will learn a lot from it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've had an interesting road, a lot of it in retail, a lot of it in fashion and luxury. And it's been a nice blend of in-house and out-of-house. I've worked at creative agencies like Fallon, I've worked at Ford Models, and I've also been in-house at places like The Gap, like the Dayton Hudson Corporation and Target stores, Michael Kors, and Taylor. So I've seen a little bit of all sides of that. And I am a partner at a company called Forecast, and we really specialize in 2 things. One is casting. And casting not just in the traditional sense of what model is going to be in the campaign, but working with brands and clients to determine who makes sense for them, whether it's a brand ambassador, whether it's real people, whether it's street casting or quarterly casting for e-commerce, from high street to high end, from e-com all the way up to campaign, we do it all. And it's important to us as people who care about marketing and care about our clients and as consumers to really help clients develop a content and a talent strategy that extends across all media and all spaces that you're interacting with the client. So casting is one piece of that. The other thing that we do is we consult a lot in the creative operations space. This is really my specialty. I've run in-house agencies, I've been out-of-house running agencies and being on the client services side. So understanding the content creation process, the production process, the asset rollout process, again from all aspects of the client side, and also from the high volume content to the very specific content. So we've worked with a great variety of clients, a lot of luxury, LVMH, Stella McCartney, Bulgari, then all the way to great brands like Famous Footwear and Clark's and Cat. Now I just realized I just referenced 3 shoe companies. Shoe fetish,
Who does not?
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I mean, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine about how you can tell a lot from people by the handbags and the shoes they wear,
Yes.
and how there's been a flip in 2019, in the last few years, because it used to be you could be able to tell somebody because of the type of bag they carry.
Yes.
And now it's actually the shoes combined together.
Ah.
Because you can see someone carrying this really big over-the-top bag, but then they've got these really awesome-looking sneakers. That tells you something versus someone who's carrying this big over-the-top bag, and they're wearing just super high heels. Y'all don't work. You don't actually do anything. You can tell.
No, and I think there's a practicality. Nobody would actually want to admit to that except for maybe me because I'm practical. But I have to say that athleisure, or as I'm demonstrating today, nobody can see me, athleisy, as I like to call it.
Athleisy is all good.
It's this idea that we can now blend something very practical, and especially when, for those of us that live in New York or major metropolitan major markets, or if you're, as we were talking about earlier today, when you're a consultant and you're on the go all the time. I mean, having a beautiful shoe is great, but I really want to wear a sneaker the majority of the time. And that's one of the great things, as you said, that's happened lately, is that there are amazing sneakers out there. And there are so many brand collaborations as well. So you have Nike and Asics and Adidas and Reebok doing these incredible collaborations. So you still have that basic, comfortable, amazing shoe, but they've taken it to the next level by collaborating with luxury brand or couture.
Yeah, it's funny. I was on a subway yesterday coming back from the marathon, and I saw these 2 young guys on a train. And from the clothes, you couldn't really tell what the deal was, but one of them had this really awesome off-white backpack, and then he had the Stasi sneakers that was a collaboration with Nike. And I was like, oh, it's rich kids.
There you go.
Because wait a minute, the clothing couldn't really give it away, but you could have picked any bag, and you pick an off-white bag, which is super duper expensive, and those are limited edition all white Stasi sneakers.
There's a message there, clearly. Yeah.
You're trying to do the high-low in a really special way, and they're but we can see that.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I think, even when you look at the casting and what you guys do, I'm sure the way that you're finding these new models for brand ambassadors and influencers, you're looking at all this and sort of how they sort of style themselves, because it's no longer okay, we'll make you into something.
Absolutely.
It's no, what is the look that you are already bringing to the table? So all we're doing is our clothes just be accentuated by you already.
Absolutely. It's the personality of the person in many cases as much as it is who's the stylist, who's the photographer, who's art directing. And I think that's really a shift, because as I'm sure you've noticed too, that there was we had the supermodels of the 80s and 90s.
The Trinity.
Amazing. I know. I still love them every time they show up. But then we also had this grand parade, if you will, and I mean this in a very loving and wonderful way, of celebrities on the covers of all of the major editorials, pubs. And Now I think that we are looking, then we had obviously the rise of the influencer, and now I think we're going in a little bit of a new direction, which we are really excited about. It's something that we feel strongly about, which is what we call the inspirers. These are people who maybe are making a difference in their community. And again, depending on the budget that the client has, it can be somebody who's very specific to a region. We're talking a lot about localization. We're talking about making sure that you're speaking to the audience in each region, especially if you're a global company. But then also saying, okay, you're a global company, you have a little larger budget. All right, well then what about someone from the women's U.S. soccer team? I mean, you really can look across the spectrum. And these are people who evoke an emotion beyond, am I going to look good in that outfit, or I need that shoe, or I want to go do what they're doing. It is really an emotional response of connectivity. And I think connection is so important to what we're doing now and what marketers are doing now. And I'll reference the power of connection. It's on a base level, to each and every one of us, it's connection with our family, our friends, it's our day-to-day contact. It's connection with your network. I mean, being able to extend beyond just the small group of people you know to the larger group of people they know. What do you want to call it, the Kevin Bacon effect, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, which I still think is hilarious. And for brands, it's connection to the guest. It's connection to consumers. It's creating some sort of emotional response that is positive and I'll call it warming, and it needs to evoke something that it's exciting for them, because let's face it, the millennials and the Gen Z, and I know those are big target audiences, and I always tell people, don't forget about Gen X, because we're still here and we still spend.
And you have lots of money to spend if people talk to you.
Yes,
I
know.
understand.
Subaru's the only one right now. I'm really disappointed. But I do think that there is this incredible opportunity to look beyond the sort of the cookie cutter talent that we've seen in the past. And don't get me wrong, I love all elements of talent and all elements of casting, but there is the opportunity to do something new. And then I'll reference Refinery 29. We do a lot of work with Refinery 29 UK, who we love, and they're always looking for new faces, and that not just another new pretty face, but looking at diversity, being inclusive with their casting, because their guest is all shapes, sizes, colors, genders, sexuality. I mean, let's be inclusive, and let's be, if we're trying to share information and be connected, well, let's do that with everybody, not just by showing you a particular five people that are amazingly beautiful. Let's be inclusive. And I've seen more and more clients adopting that and embracing that, and I think that's a great direction that we're going in.
Well, it's interesting, because I think what I've seen from when I was a kid who was tearing out magazines for Cosmo and what that looked like, and doesn't she look great wearing brand X?
Yes.
To, oh cool, I'm so glad brand X is supporting blah blah blah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Which is a huge shift, but it also makes me want to buy your stuff more.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that you don't hear enough brands realizing that that's the shift.
Yes.
That I could buy your one bag.
Yep.
Isn't it awesome?
Yep.
Or I love what you're doing so much, and I'm really taken by the fact that you're making steps here that I'm gonna buy a bag, I'm gonna buy a pair of shoes, I'm gonna tell my friends,
Yes.
we're gonna have a party at the store.
Yep.
The opportunity for you to actually engage with the brand far more deeply, which means you're gonna end up spending more, is definitely a trend that I've started to see. Even with myself and the stuff that I buy, it's okay, yeah, because I'll buy the whole damn thing, sure.
Yes.
Because I like what you're doing, as opposed to I don't want to buy your stuff because you don't get it.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I think it's a very different perspective on brand loyalty than we had in the 80s and 90s, which was, if you throw a logo on it, people will buy it. And not to say that logos have gone away, because certainly they're still important and prevalent, and there's a large audience for that. But I think that it's the brand and what they're doing and who they're involving themselves with that's just as important, and what they're showing. I mean, really, who they're showing themselves to be, because brands aren't nameless, they're not faceless. They need to, again, have they need to have an emotion, a presence that really engages with people. And I think that, I agree, that's been a wonderful direction to see how it's going, and I think it's a change in how we look at brand loyalty.
And if you think about it, it's like it can only get better.
Yes.
It's like, not that you kind of cracked open the genie at this point. Like you're not gonna stick it back in with, oh, we used to like we like being good now. Like actually never mind. We'll just go back to being like a soulless, faceless brand. But it's also that like brands are realizing that they have to personify something. And I think that, if you look at a bunch of marketing textbooks, that's always been like the 4 Ps, but like it was always sort of like there was still a distance.
Yes. Yes.
And I think what's happening now, which is fascinating, I'm sure when you guys are now getting calls to cast and but also you're now talking to inspirers, where like 5 years ago you try to pitch that and they'd be like, what? No.
Absolutely.
It's like, no, we want a Kardashian.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It would have to be a PR initiative, and now it's not. It's a marketing-driven initiative that has PR elements, and I think that's something that has been so important, and something that you and I have talked about is the importance of brands recognizing that they need to be aware and they need to be culturally inclusive, because that's been an issue that we've seen with some brands recently, of not understanding that you can't design in a bubble, you can't create marketing in a bubble. You really need to include people who are experts and people who can, thought leaders who can help you navigate some of those difficult arenas. And I know back in the day that nobody ever wanted to question the creative director, and that
they were God.
They were God, and what says goes. And in many cases, we had incredible creative that came out of that mentality. And in a lot of cases, there were creatives that just did amazing things. But one of the things I actually, when I was at Ford Models, we had a wonderful president named John Kaplan, who's now, I believe, the president of Alibaba North America. So he's gone on to do amazing things. But one of the great things about John is he didn't come from the modeling industry. The Fords brought him on because he was a marketer. And he understood how to market and how to, sell, if you will. And one of the things he always believed is the best ideas can come from anyone and anywhere. And so we used to have these little task groups, within Ford, where we go into his office and just brainstorm and strategize. It might be a junior member of staff and a senior member of staff. Excuse me. And it was a wonderful way to look at things, because I think we had a new perspective on how to work with clients after that.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, because I think what ends up happening is that as brands start to realize that like you can't just assume that everyone's going to love you because you're brand X. And that's going to be forever and for always.
Right.
And, you look at it and like, hello, Barney's.
Right. Yeah, J. Crew. Yeah.
It's, there's no more Lomans.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Lomans,
Yes.
I almost feel like there's like some karmic justification that Barney's is closing because they took over Loman's location on 17th Street.
Yes, they did.
Because like good friends of mine, like that used to be our home. Cause I used to when I worked before having DF in agencies, I literally spent 4 different jobs working within 4 blocks of Lomans over the course of 6 years.
Dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really dangerous. My closet was amazing. But when they closed, I remember thinking, do they think the shopper who shopped at Lomans is now going to shop at Barney's? And this is never going to work. Like, we called this years ago.
Right.
And we were right.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
like, okay, what does Barney stand for?
Right. And I think fashion is so accessible right now. And so you have people who, could not get to a Barney's, that could not get to Saks, Harrods, whatever it may be, Galeries Lafayette if you're in Paris. But now they can go to Farfetch, they can go to Net-a-Porter, they can go to Yoox. There is accessibility to people globally that didn't exist before. And this has changed also, I think, the face of the way we shop. It's changed the way that people look at, obviously, the department store experience. I love a department store. I'm still old school.
Same.
I like the experience of going in. I want to be able to shop different
be able to
areas.
try the shoes on.
Absolutely. But we are not, I think, I don't want to say we're the minority, but it's not a trend that's happening. I think that we'll continue to see some success with shop and shop, so curated boutiques within a bigger store. certainly in the major markets, we're always going to see places like Harrods and, I think Macy's 34th Street, these destinations. It's a shopping destination. So again, it's experiential for that guest rather than being, it's not the department store that has 7 locations in one city. It is an experience that it's a destination that people want to go to. And you have to create those experiences within the bigger organization.
Yeah, I think that's what people are forgetting about the future of retail. Like, you can't escape this. Like, Nordstrom just opened on 7th, and oh my god.
That is gorgeous.
That place is dangerous.
Yes, yes.
And also, but the thing that blew my mind is that, like, the first time I went to Nordstrom and over there was for lunch.
Yes.
Because I got invited for lunch.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine who works in that neighborhood was like, come meet me for lunch. And I'm like, where is this place? And then I was like, oh, it's inside the Nordstrom. I'm like, okay, great. Perfect excuse for me to go inside. And then of course I was like, oh, there's a Louis Vuitton area. And then there's a Louis Vuitton section. What? Oh,
Yes.
God. But then you go down the stairs, and then there's like 4 restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And then every floor has like a little kind of like cafe, coffee, drink. And I was like, thank you. Because guess what? We're all busy.
Yes.
So if I can sit here for 5 minutes, have a cup of cappuccino, take a phone call, guess what? I'm going to stick around here and go, oh, wait, what does that jacket look like?
Yes. Yes. And I think somebody actually had posted on LinkedIn some photos that they had taken. I think it was John Gregory from Pandora. And one of the things that he said is, you can have a meal on every floor. And I thought, this is great, because I remember that I had a friend who was at, I think she was at Ralph Lauren, and she always wanted to meet for lunch at Fred's, at Barney's. And I didn't go into the Barney's flagship store very often, but I loved going to Fred's. It was an experience, I loved the people watching, and then of course I would very slowly make my way down the escalator, stop at every floor, and then go back to the office. Because it was that experience, and I think that Nordstrom's clearly, in my view, has a long time ago they figured out customer service, and they've continued to provide that on a level that I think has been missing in many cases in retail.
You mean actually having customer service?
Yes, having polite people answer questions. It's amazing.
Just answer my question. I'm not trying to kick your baby. It's like, just serious. Just answer the question. Where do I find these shoes? That's all.
Exactly. But I think that they've done a great job. And at a time when so many retailers are closing stores, to have Nordstrom's open up.
Just mega stores.
Absolutely.
7 floors.
Absolutely. It is a department store in the truest, most beautiful version. It is glorious and beautiful, and I want to shop there. I want to go in, I want to see what they have because of the beautiful experience and because of the newness. I mean, it has all the elements that you want in retail.
Yeah, I think, I was never a fan of Barney's. And because every time I went there was always some weird foolishness that ended up happening. And it was a flip side. It was always bad customer service. And I thought to myself, like, do you know why I don't want to give you my money? I don't see a reason for me. You don't want my money. You want a celebrity's money. And I was like, this isn't. Remember, they're not buying stuff. They're here to shop and just hang out, but they're literally not going to buy anything.
Right.
And I'm here, I want to spend my money, and I feel like I'm not getting great customer service.
Right.
But then you would go to Bergdorf, and same deal. Amazing customer service,
Yes.
where, like, you couldn't, like you only get a glass of champagne, and and I've walked out with 4 pairs of shoes.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where I think brands have to understand the importance of retail doesn't have to die, it just has to reinvent itself.
Exactly. It needs to evolve. And I believe that's true of retail, marketing, fashion. I mean, fashion is constantly reinventing itself. If you look at one season to another season, 1 year to another year, there's not repetition. Sometimes there might be a throwback to an inspiration.
The archives.
Oh yeah, I mean, every time Michael Kors does something that has to do with the 70s, I get excited because he loves that era, and he does beautiful work. But there is something to be said for that. And I think that there's just an excitement that's happening now, and I think there's an excitement that can continue to happen in retail. They just have to evolve to move with it.
And so, what are you seeing that what are your clients asking you guys when you're trying to find these next batch of castings for the influencers, or even on the creative ops side, because like you're helping them be smarter from a business perspective, which will help them in so many other ways.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the things we're seeing in creative ops are really the conversation about in-house versus out-of-house. And by that I mean Do we take the creative in-house? Do we have an in-house agency? Do we take the high-volume photography in-house? Do we open an in-house studio? So there is a conversation that needs to happen around that, and that's a big part of what we do with clients, is sit down with them and do an analysis around what's working for them, what's not, what is their current process. As we've discussed in the past, I think the term divisions within a company is a little too accurate, unfortunately, because everybody's working in their own silos. And, and so there's this loss of communication and collaboration, as I'd said before. And so sitting down and trying to understand, okay, how are projects coming in? What's the easiest way to move them through the system? Are you using technology? Is everything manual? Do you still have a project manager walking around with a job jacket? Are you managing and watching everything in Excel? Is everything an Excel spreadsheet and email? And you'd be surprised by the number of companies that the answer is yes. That, I mean, Excel and email are still two of the biggest tools that marketing departments use and creative departments. And I think that doesn't mean you have to buy a $100,000 tool. I think I like to say small changes can lead to big wins, but you have to do them in a smart fashion. You have to do the research, and then the analysis. You can't just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. You really need to understand how things work now, what do your clients want, whether they're internal or external, and what's possible. I mean, there are always going to be things that can't be changed. A lot of luxury brands have the issue of the items come into the showroom for the runway shows, and then they go right back out for press. And so if you're trying to capture any of those looks or any of those items for e-com, it might be 3 months before you see that sample again. Because,
oh my gosh.
Let's face it, nobody can buy 3 sets of samples. I mean, if you're Louis Vuitton, if you're Gucci, imagine 1 set of samples, how much that is. If you're trying to buy 3 sets to cover off and be able to take, to cover photography and copywriting in a short period of time, it gets very hard to do. So you have to be smart. Do your shoot in your showroom? How do you work the process? Are those samples correct, or are they going to change during production? And so what actually ends up coming out doesn't look like what you have walking the runway. And interestingly enough, it isn't just the couture brands that are having that conversation. Everybody, I mean, certainly at the Gap, it was something that we talked about, is we were capturing samples, but then when we saw the final product, it had changed. And so what ends up being easier, retouching or shooting the correct product and then moving it through the system in a faster manner? So a big part of what we do with the creative ops is helping people be more efficient and effective within the parameters of today, which is tighter budgets, tighter timelines. You need to create more content.
Go.
Exactly. A friend of mine calls it content velocity. And I think that's perfect because there is this expectation to have newness every time they customers interact with a brand. So that's a big part of what we're seeing in creative ops, and like I said, I call it the in-house versus out-of-house conversation. And it changes from year to year, depends on what each company is doing. With casting, I think I say be inspired and be inspiring. So if you can look to, whether it's, at Ann Taylor we did a great project where we wanted to capture all different sizes and shapes. So petite, tall, plus, straight size. So what we did was we actually looked at all the women who worked in the office. And we basically said, how do you wear your look? What do you call your style? How do you style yourself? And it wasn't about size or shape. It was about people's personal sense of style. And again, it was experiential. It was evoking an emotion. So that's something we try to do with clients, is figure out really what is the core. People bring us on at the last minute, which is great. We're happy to do those projects, but we're also happy to start at the beginning.
You're right.
Which is be involved in those conversations early on, because obviously, like anything, if you have more time, you can source more options. So we can look at non-traditional casting solutions. We can look at people who, you don't need to just book a Kardashian or a Jenner. You can look at micro-influencers. You can look at what are the regions you're trying to hit. Are there new areas of business that are growing? Are you speaking to them? Again, it's that localization. It's understanding who your audience is and who you're going after, and making sure that you are choosing people who speak to them. One of the things, the story I always like to tell is, we had a brand that we worked with, and the CEO loved Emily Ratajkowski, who's a beautiful model actress, and she's great, and she's amazing, and she has over 1 million followers on Instagram, and she's perfect for certain brands. But this brand was a women's brand, and it was not a lingerie brand. It was not a brand that, men weren't going to look at her carrying a handbag and go, I'm going to get my lady that handbag because Emily has it and it's very sexy.
Not never.
No. And so her audience was 90% men, and they weren't following the type of, they were following Miller Lite or the New York Yankees. And so it was going back and saying, okay, I understand she's got a million followers, but is she really right for the messaging? Is she right for who you're going after? Is she right for your core audience? Or are they going to be like, really, this is who you chose?
Yeah, just preface.
Right. Do you know less than your audience? I think that's something you also need to ask, because they know what they like and they know what they want from you. And in a lot of cases, it's worth asking. Whether that's testing, email A/B testing, as simple as that, or really doing focus groups. Focus groups are something I think are missed out on sometimes in today's day and age. But I think it's looking for new faces in every respect that you can look at that word, not just who are the up-and-coming models.
Yeah, I think it's much more about the curation of everything at the end of the day. Where it's like, listen, your brand can't just represent X anymore. And this, super hot supermodel is not going to sell your product anymore. Because guess who? Because it's always surprising to me that brands forget who actually their customers are. And you're like, wait, why would you think that women want to see another hot woman who's wearing the one size of your product and think, now I'm gonna go buy that? Or do you turn around? Do you really think that their boyfriends are gonna or husbands are gonna buy that for them? And even if they did, let's do this thought experiment now. They did, they'd be like, take it back. I would never wear this. What? No.
Absolutely not. And did you even get the right size? Because that's
a whole other side of you.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it sounds, it's fascinating to see how brands are like, oh, wait a minute, again, what do you stand for as a brand, and how are you engaging in this world? Because obviously, we're in the world of cancel culture, and people are freaked out about all that. And I think it's not even more about cancel culture, but it's more about embracing the culture affects everything now, and you don't have 3 channels anymore, and wives are not home watching the Tide commercial and going out and going to buy Tide.
Yes.
That is no longer the case, and if that's no longer the case, how do you effectively adapt and evolve as a result of that?
Absolutely, and I think you have to think outside the box in so many different ways, and there's this idea that I remember as a kid, we used to watch Saturday night TV together, the whole family, because there were only 3 stations. And so if we weren't watching Dallas, we were watching Falcon Crest or Knots Landing or whatever, it was. And now there's infinite choice and there's infinite possibility. And again, as we talked about earlier, people have infinite access to brands and to retailers and to fashion. And so they're going to make their own selection. They want to be inspired by curated casting, curated styling, curated collection of product, but they also want to be able to make their own choices. And I think that the consumers are much smarter now. Not that they weren't smart before, but I just don't think they knew everything that was out there. And now we have so much to choose from that to get people's attention, you have to do something special. And again, I think it's the power of connection that really helps brands connect. It really helps brands elevate themselves out of the melee of everybody else that's out there.
It's so true. So what would you tell a 25-year-old Clair, sitting here now?
Have faith, be grateful, and be persistent. We all have days that are tough, and we're always hard on ourselves, but I think the greatest learning that I've had over the years is that you are the only one that can affect change in your life. And so be strong for yourself, and remember, you know what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, you're great at what you do. So there's my positive moment.
Awesome, perfect. So what does Clair do when she wants to escape? And and her version of self-care? And the reason I ask is because I think, as I've evolved this podcast, I've realized that more and more leaders who are busy, who are doing game-changing work, have also now realized they have to sort of have some me time. And that's the only way you can continue to be successful, or you hit a wall.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're like me, and you really struggle at meditation.
It's not easy.
No?
I will attest.
Ooh. Something that dawned on me many years ago. I was working at Michael Kors, and I was the VP of Creative Ops and overseeing in-house agency. It was a wonderful job and I had a wonderful team, but it was a lot of work. And I found myself sometimes getting frustrated. I'd be going home on the train at 8 or 9 at night, 10 at night, being frustrated. And I discovered that I really benefited from taking a walk after work. And whether it was 4 blocks or 4 miles all the way home, it really helped me out. And so I recommend people have an adventure every day. And if it doesn't have to be a big adventure, it can be small. It can be getting off at a different station. It can be, try coffee somewhere else. I mean, we never want to be let down by trying something new, but if you can have a small adventure every day, then life feels fresh. And I think that that's one thing that has made a big difference for me in frankly coping with the number of hours that we all put in our industries. And being a consultant, our life is always changing, and we never know exactly how many hours this week, how many hours next week. And so by having these small little joys in life, it really does make a difference. And yes, sometimes that means having a slice of pizza or getting a bagel on the way to work. Absolutely, 100%.
That's awesome. I love that, the idea of having an adventure every day, because especially when you live in a bigger city, it's a little bit easier to have an adventure every day.
True. Yeah.
But I do think it's really important that you give yourself a little bit of that time to just sort of wander aimlessly.
Absolutely.
I always joke about New York City, that on any given day and any given street corner, there are 1,000 different stories in one place.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And if you think of it that way, then you have so much more to explore, because you can dip in and dip out of all of these different fascinating stories in a day. And that is the kind of the beauty of it all. And take the good with the bad. So that's really awesome. So what's next in the Land of Forecast Agency? So you guys are obviously busy because Fashion Week is coming.
Fashion Week is coming, and a lot of our clients are looking towards the end of the year, and they're really looking towards 2020, because this is a shift. I was calling it I was saying to a friend, we're doing a webinar on creative ops early next year, and I was calling it 2020 a creative operations odyssey, because it does, I do feel like we're at this, retail is always changing, fashion is always changing, but there is this exciting newness that I feel like we have, and in fact I'm actually sitting on the edge of my seat right now as I say this to you, that there's a real opportunity, and so take advantage of it. I mean, really put yourself out there and enjoy it, and and brands, take chances, be edgy. As people love to say in our industry right now, be agile.
Oh, good Lord. That's a great one. Well, with that, thank you so much, Claire. You were such a delight. And it's always fascinating to talk to someone who's actually in it and see what they can see. So it's always a delight to learn from smart folks like yourself. So thank you so much. And that's our show.